They thought they picked the perfect target. A black man driving alone at night in a quiet neighborhood. They laughed, planted drugs in his car, and thought it would be an easy arrest. But what they didn't know was that the man they were framing wasn't just anybody. He was the FBI director. And by the time they realized, it was already too late. It was a warm Friday evening in Washington, D.C. The kind of night when the streets seemed calmer than usual, when even the sirens that usually fill the air were strangely silent. A black man in his mid-50s sat behind the wheel of a sleek black Cadillac Escalade, the tinted windows reflecting the dim glow of passing streetlights. His suit jacket was neatly folded on the passenger seat, his tie loosened just slightly, and his expression was calm. Too calm for what was about to happen. To anyone looking from the outside, he looked like an ordinary professional heading home after a long day at work. But the truth was far from ordinary. His name was Daniel Carter, and though few recognized his face in public, everyone in law enforcement knew his title. He was the sitting director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. But tonight, on a lonely stretch of road, two corrupt cops had no idea who they were dealing with. The flashing blue and red lights appeared suddenly in his rear-view mirror. Daniel sighed, his fingers tightening on the steering wheel. He hadn't been speeding, hadn't run a light, hadn't even touched his phone. Still, he knew the drill. He pulled over slowly, parking under a dim street lamp. Two officers approached. One tall and heavy-set with shaved head, the other lean with nervous eyes darting around. License and registration. The heavy-set officer barked, without greeting, without reason. Daniel kept his tone steady. "Sure, officer. May I ask what the stop is for?" The cop smirked. "You'll find out soon enough." The other officer circled around the Escalade, shining his flashlight into the back seat as if hunting for prey. Daniel handed over his documents calmly. The officer barely glanced at them before walking back toward the squad car, and that's when it happened. The lean officer lingered by the passenger side. Daniel watched carefully in the side mirror. He saw the man reach into his vest, pull out a small plastic bag filled with white powder, glance around nervously, and then drop it between the seat cushions. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Seconds later, the heavy-set officer returned, tossing Daniel's license carelessly into his lap. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered. Daniel opened the door slowly, his movements controlled, deliberate. The streetlight above flickered, casting long shadows across the pavement. The lean officer already had his flashlight aimed at the passenger seat. "Well, well, well," he muttered, his voice laced with fake surprise. "What do we have here?" He reached down, pulled out the planted bag, and held it up like a trophy. The heavy-set cop sneered. "Looks like possession of narcotics. That's a felony, pal." Daniel stared at the bag, then at the two men, his expression unreadable. Inside, his mind was racing. He could expose them in an instant, pull rank, flash his credentials. But something stopped him. Something colder. Something more calculating. Instead, he asked quietly, "Are you sure you want to do this?" The cops laughed. "Oh, it's already done." They shoved him against the hood of his own car, cuffed his wrists, and recited the words like a script. "You have the right to remain silent." And Daniel did remain silent, but not out of fear, out of strategy. At the precinct, Daniel was thrown into a holding cell, stripped of his dignity but not his power. The two corrupt officers filed a bogus report, high-fiving each other as if they'd just closed the case of the century. But inconsistencies were already piling up. The evidence log showed the drugs were found before the arrest time was even officially recorded. The paperwork was sloppy, signatures mismatched, and the anonymous tip that supposedly led to the stop? Non-existent. Daniel sat calmly on the metal bench, his eyes scanning every detail, memorizing every name, every timestamp. The lean officer passed by the cell and sneered, "Hope you like county jail food." Daniel didn't respond. He simply leaned back, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Because what they didn't know was that his phone, confiscated at the station, had already sent a silent distress signal to his FBI detail. His location was being tracked, his every word recorded, and somewhere across town, agents were already on their way. Morning came. Daniel was escorted into an interrogation room. Still cuffed, still silent. The two officers sat across from him, smug and confident. "You're done," the heavy-set one growled. "Guys like you think you're above the law. Well, not anymore." Daniel finally spoke, his voice calm, measured. "You really think you know who I am?" The officers exchanged a glance, then laughed. "You're nobody," the lean one said. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes, sharp and unflinching, locked on theirs. "Gentlemen," he said slowly, "you've made a terrible mistake." The door swung open. Two men in suits walked in, their badges gleaming. Behind them, half a dozen federal agents. The room froze. "Director Carter," when the suited men said respectfully, "Are you all right, sir?" The two crooked cops paled, their mouths falling open. "Director Carter." Their prisoner was the head of the FBI. The heavy-set officer stammered, "TH, this is some kind of joke." But it wasn't. The agents uncuffed Daniel, treating him with the deference his position demanded. He straightened his tie, his calm demeanor never faltering. Then he turned to the two officers, who were now trembling in their seats. "You thought you were planting evidence," Daniel said softly, "but what you really planted was your own downfall." The federal agents stepped forward, ready to make the arrest. But before they could act, the precinct doors burst open. A group of uniformed officers stormed in, led by a captain with cold, calculating eyes. He looked directly at Daniel and said, "I'm afraid you're not taking my men anywhere." The room tensed. Hands hovered near weapons. A standoff was seconds away. Daniel narrowed his eyes, realizing corruption ran deeper than just two dirty cops. This wasn't about a traffic stop anymore. This was war. And with that, the screen fades to black. The room was tense. So tense you could almost hear the sound of hearts pounding louder than the ticking clock on the wall. Federal agents stood on one side, their hands resting dangerously close to their holstered weapons. On the other side, the precinct captain and his squad of officers stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes locked, ready to defend their own at all costs. Director Carter didn't move, didn't flinch. He simply studied the captain, his expression calm, but his eyes sharp like steel. "Captain Hayes," Carter said slowly, his voice echoing in the interrogation room, "do you realize what you're doing right now?" The captain smirked. "What I'm doing," he said, "is protecting my men. You waltz in here with your suits and badges, thinking you can drag them off like criminals? Not on my watch." Carter leaned forward, his voice lowering but carrying more weight than any raised shout. "They are criminals, and if you keep obstructing justice, then so are you." For a moment, the entire room held its breath. Then Captain Hayes chuckled darkly. "You really think you're untouchable, don't you, Director?" That word, director, hung in the air. The crooked cops had already revealed his identity, and now the entire precinct knew. The smirk on Hayes' face told Carter everything he needed to know. This wasn't random. This wasn't just a couple of rogue officers gone bad. This was orchestrated. And Hayes wasn't just protecting his men. He was protecting something much bigger. Suddenly, the lean cop, the one who planted the drugs, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His face was pale, his lips trembling. He looked from Hayes to Carter, then back again. "Cap," he whispered, his voice shaky. "Maybe we should just—" "Shut up," Hayes snapped. But it was too late. Carter had seen it. The fear, the hesitation. He knew then that this officer wasn't fully committed to the corruption. He was scared, desperate, maybe even salvageable. Carter locked eyes with him and said calmly, "What's your name, officer?" The man swallowed hard. "Lewis. Officer Lewis," Carter said firmly. "Do you understand what's happening here? You've been used. Hayes isn't protecting you. He's protecting himself. Don't listen to him." Hayes barked, stepping closer. But the seed of doubt had already been planted, and Lewis' nervous eyes betrayed the truth. He was cracking under pressure. Before the standoff could explode, the precinct phone rang. The sound was piercing, jarring, cutting through the tension like a knife. Hayes picked it up, his jaw tightening as he listened. His face drained the color. When he hung up, he turned toward Carter. That was the mayor's office. Hayes muttered. "They're demanding your immediate release, and they're sending someone down here." The room went silent. The mayor? Why would the mayor of Washington, D.C. intervene directly in a precinct arrest? Unless, of course, the corruption reached City Hall itself. Carter's suspicions deepened. Someone wanted him silenced, but someone else wanted him freed. Which side was the mayor on? Minutes later, the precinct doors opened again. A woman in a tailored navy blue suit walked in, her heels clicking sharply against the tile floor. She carried an aura of authority, her sharp eyes scanning the room like a hawk. "Director Carter," she said, extending her hand. "My name is Alicia Ramirez. I represent the mayor's office." Carter shook her hand firmly, reading her every micro-expression. She was confident, composed, but beneath that polished exterior, there was tension. "We need to speak privately," Ramirez said. Hayes bristled. "Anything you have to say to him, you can say in front of me." Ramirez turned, her voice icy. "No, Captain, this is above your pay grade." The way she said it made Hayes flinch. Carter followed Ramirez into a side office, flanked by his federal agents. Once the door was shut, Ramirez leaned in. "You're in danger, Director," she whispered. "This goes far beyond crooked cops. They weren't just trying to frame you. They were trying to send a message." Carter's eyes narrowed. "From who?" Ramirez hesitated. Then she said one name, a name that made even Carter's stomach drop. Ramirez's voice was low, steady, but laced with fear. "They work for Senator Marshall." Carter froze. Senator Thomas Marshall wasn't just any politician. He was one of the most powerful figures in Washington, respected, influential, with a spotless public image. But Carter knew better. He had files, classified reports, whispers of corruption, connections to organized crime, even rumors of backroom deals with cartels. But those files were never conclusive, never enough to bring him down. Until now, Carter realized what had happened. The crooked cops had tried to frame him. If the arrest stuck, his career would be over. If his career was over, his investigation into Senator Marshall would vanish. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. And it went all the way to Capitol Hill. Carter leaned back, processing the weight of the revelation. "Senator Marshall sent them after me?" he asked. Ramirez nodded grimly. "You're getting too close. He knows about your investigation. He wants you discredited, humiliated, out of the picture." Carter's jaw tightened. "Then why tell me? Whose side are you on?" Ramirez hesitated just long enough to raise suspicion. "I'm on the side of the truth." But Carter had spent his life reading people, decoding lies, sniffing out half-truths. And something about Ramirez's tone told him she wasn't giving him the full picture. Before he could press further, the office door burst open. It was Officer Lewis, the nervous one. His face was pale, his chest heaving. "They're coming," he gasped. "The captain. He's not going to let you leave alive." Carter stood instantly, his agents drawing their weapons. "Coming where?" Carter demanded. Lewis's eyes darted wildly. "They're not just cops. They're part of something bigger. You don't understand, this whole precinct is a trap." The lights flickered. Somewhere in the building, the sound of heavy boots echoed closer and closer. The ambush had already begun. Carter pulled his sidearm, his eyes blazing with determination. He had walked into a nest of corruption, and now the walls were closing in. His FBI agents formed a protective circle around him. Officer Lewis stood trembling by the door, torn between loyalty and survival. Ramirez whispered urgently, "We need to move. Now." But before they could make a step, the fire alarm blared. Red lights flashed. Smoke seeped under the door. And through the chaos, a chilling voice echoed through the intercom. "Daniel Carter, you should have stayed quiet. Tonight, you won't make it out alive." The fire alarm screamed through the precinct like a banshee, its shrill cry mixing with the flashing red lights that bathed every hallway in a hellish glow. Director Carter moved swiftly, his instincts sharpened by decades of field work. Even though he was a director now, the old training never left him. His agents flanked him on both sides, weapons drawn, scanning the smoky corridors. Officer Lewis stumbled beside them, coughing, his nerves unraveling with every step. "We can't go out the front." Lewis shouted over the alarm. "They've sealed it." Captain Hayes locked it down. Carter's eyes darted down the hall. He saw silhouettes moving in the smoke, heavily armed, too precise to be ordinary cops. "SWAT," one of Carter's agents muttered, "but they're not ours." And that was when Carter knew this wasn't just a cover-up. This was a hit squad, disguised as law enforcement, moving in to erase him. They reached the stairwell. Ramirez pushed the door open, urging Carter inside. "This way. Basement exit leads to the garage." But Carter hesitated. His instincts screamed something was wrong. Ramirez was too calm, too insistent, as if she knew the way by heart. "Why the basement?" he demanded. "You seem awfully sure of the route." Ramirez's eyes flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. "She's leading us into a trap," Carter growled. Before Ramirez could protest, the sound of boots thundered above. Armed men were pouring down the stairs. Carter shoved Ramirez against the wall, his agents forming a barricade as bullets ripped through the smoke. Lewis screamed and ducked, his hands over his head. Carter dragged him forward. "Move, officer, unless you want to die here." They blasted through the stairwell, choosing the upper floors instead of the basement. Ramirez screamed after them, her voice echoing with frustration. "You're making a mistake, Carter." But he wasn't so sure. The bigger mistake might have been trusting her at all. Upstairs, chaos reigned. Uniformed cops sprinted through the halls, some panicked, others focused. It was impossible to tell who was innocent and who was in on the conspiracy. Carter's agents moved methodically, clearing corners, returning fire when necessary. But their ammunition was running low. "We can't keep this up," one agent hissed. "They'll box us in." Carter scanned the hall, then spotted it, a security room. "In there," he barked. They kicked down the door and stormed inside. Banks of monitors flickered with surveillance footage of the entire precinct. Through the haze, Carter spotted something chilling on the screens. Dozens of masked men moving through the building. Not police, not even SWAT, mercenaries. Armed to the teeth, operating with surgical precision. This wasn't just a cleanup job. This was an execution order. And it was signed higher than Captain Hayes. On one of the screens, Carter saw a figure standing in the precinct lobby. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a tailored suit. His face was hidden beneath the brim of his hat, but his stance was unmistakable. Senator Marshall. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was here. And as if to taunt Carter directly, Marshall looked up at the nearest camera, straight into the lens, and raised his hand. He held up a phone. Seconds later, Carter's own confiscated phone buzzed on the desk of the security room. The agents exchanged stunned looks. Carter picked it up, pressed it to his ear. Marshall's voice came through, smooth, calculated, dripping with arrogance. "Daniel," he said, as if they were old friends, "you should have let sleeping dogs lie. But you couldn't, could you? You just had to dig. Now look where it got you." Carter's voice was cold. "You'll never get away with this." Marshall chuckled softly. "I already have. You won't live to see the morning. And by the time they find your body, the story will be clean. FBI director caught in a drug bust gone wrong. Killed in a tragic shootout. Neat, tidy, believable." The line went dead, and the monitors showed Marshall turning and walking out of the precinct like a man leaving a business meeting. Untouched, untouchable. Carter slammed the phone down. He turned to his agents. "We're not dying here. There's still a way out." He pointed to the monitors. On the east side of the precinct, an armored van was parked by the loading bay. 2 mercenaries stood guard. "If we get to that van, we can punch through," Carter said. "But sir," one agent warned, "it's suicide. Too many hostiles between here and there." Carter's eyes hardened. "Then we make it through. Failure is not an option." Lewis trembled in the corner, his voice cracking. "Why don't you just call in the FBI task force? Call in backup." Carter fixed him with a grim look. "Because the comms are jammed. And if this precinct is compromised, how do we know the field office isn't too? We don't know who we can trust." That truth hit like a sledgehammer. They were on their own. They moved fast, cutting through the maze of corridors. Gunfire erupted around them. Carter's agents took point, dropping mercenaries with precise shots. Smoke grenades clouded the halls, but the casualties mounted. One agent went down, then another, their bodies dragging behind as the team pushed forward. Lewis was screaming now, panic overtaking him. "We'll never make it. We're dead. We're all dead." Carter grabbed him by the collar, yanking him close. His voice was steel. "Listen to me, Lewis. You're not dead unless you give up. You want to live? Then move your damn feet." For the first time, Lewis's fear turned into something else, determination. He nodded, swallowed hard, and followed. They burst into the loading bay. The armored van was there. 2 mercenaries spotted them, raising their rifles. Carter didn't hesitate. He put both men down with 2 sharp shots. His agents pulled the van doors open. "Inside, move." They piled in, slamming the doors shut. The engine roared to life. For a moment, it felt like they had won, until the windshield exploded in a hail of bullets. Kindly support our channel. Like and subscribe for more interesting and powerful stories.